Hey, welcome back, everyone. So in our next session, we have two very special guests. And we're going to be talking about the important role that wireless connectivity plays in the education of our children. You may have seen in the last session, though, there's actually a much bigger story here in general, which is talking about connectivity. And we heard from Champion and Lincoln Stevenson about the challenges of staying connected in the field. So we heard from people that today are working in San Mateo counties and surrounding regions to inspect infrastructure and the importance of connectivity in those roles. And that's why today is such a special presentation, because we have two experts here to talk to us about real work going on right now. So to give a little bit of an introduction, for many of us, stable internet connectivity is a requirement for our jobs, our relationships with our communities, and our ability to interact with the world. For many families in the United States, access to stable internet is not possible, increasing the digital divide from those who have and those who have not. Today, we're going to talk about why this gap matters and what two leaders are doing to create a more equitable digital society for all of us. Let's quickly remind ourselves why this matters. To many of us, this photograph is a poignant reminder of a world before COVID, a world before the classroom came home. As of this month, nearly 50 million K-12 students now attend public schools remotely, placing extreme pressures on our infrastructure and communities. Unfortunately, not all households have been affected equally. We know that impoverished communities have suffered the most through these transitions. These households without stable internet connectivity are being left behind. Today, we're going to talk about the County of San Mateo and how two leaders are helping close this digital gap. What initially began as a project is now ready to mature into a full program. Joining me today to talk about this transition are John Walton and Dow Jensen. So John Walton is the Chief Information Officer for San Mateo County. Formerly, he was the Chief Information Officer at San Francisco. Joining with him is Dow Kaizen, Chief Executive Officer at Kaizen Technology Partners, and also a recent award winner of Microsoft's Women in Business Innovation Entrepreneurial Program. Dow, congratulations. John, it is so great to have you guys on this program. And I'll just speak real briefly. I thank you, Dow, for the introduction. So a couple of weeks ago, Dow had introduced me into what was going on in the San Mateo Connectivity Inclusion Project, and I got to be a fly on the wall, and I got to hear a little bit about what you guys were doing, and it was an incredible opportunity. And after that meeting, I was like, this is a story that I want to be able to bring to our customers in the utilities, oil and gas, and telecom sector at Unearth. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And maybe we could just start off with, could you guys tell us a little bit about the program and what it is you're doing?
John, you're on mute.
Unmuted. Okay, there we go. So my first wish is that we'd all just standardize on a single universal teleconferencing platform, because even as a CIO, I'm challenged every time I log in. I always seem to have some issue that probably user created, but there you go. But thank you for having me, and I'm happy to talk about this. Yeah, the history of digital divide and connectivity is a long one. I've been working on this for probably close to 20 years. When I was a CIO in San Jose, we were trying to hang these radio Metrocom modems off streetlights, and that was really old technology, and it didn't work out. And then I went and became CIO in San Francisco, and there was this explosion of iPhones and personal devices, and so connectivity became kind of the standard. Everyone, went from thinking you had to be at home with the PC to this whole mobile idea that, first it was 3G and then LTE, and then public Wi-Fi and private Wi-Fi, and businesses came along. And so connectivity has really become, I think, an expectation for things like education and telehealth. So in San Mateo, we really took that on 5 years ago and slowly started to build a public internet access network all over the county. That first map you showed on the splash screen was kind of the history of it, and had over 1 million user hours per month using that system for a variety of things. And then the pandemic came along, and we were blessed to get a lot of funding from the federal government through the CARES Act to expand that program in a very short timeline, because CARES money was limited. We, in government can't move as fast always as we would like, and we don't have the resources. We were busy addressing other issues. So fortunately, we were already working with Kaizen and Dow another project around data analytics, and it turned out she and her company were the best fit to move us kind of to what I would call public Wi-Fi 2.0 and integrating everything we were doing with the libraries and the school systems, and did a great job. But I should probably let her tell that story because I was just an observer after that.
Thanks, John. I think a lot of it comes down to having real data to know where the children and families are in need. You can have Wi-Fi hotspots given away. You can have internet and broadband companies saying that there's internet connectivity, but when you actually ask the end users their user experience and they can't get it to work, that's where you have the real problem, right? So using data science and using all the data while masking the privacy of the children, that's what we did, was to be able to put it on a visual map, which John is, and his team had a great idea of. We just implemented it and created a heat map to be able to show where should we focus on next after all the years that San Mateo has already been providing free Wi-Fi, who was actually getting it and who still needed help.
That's fantastic. So John, I can see why you partnered with Kaizen for this project. That makes a lot of sense. Dow, can you tell us a little bit about how you work with your clients in general? Like, what are some of the other things that you guys are doing for clients like John and others?
Yeah, sure. We actually just started it in the public sector last year, but a big area of our focus is cloud. As COVID and the pandemic has occurred, more and more people are realizing the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars they put into data centers, and local offices are not the answer to continue to keep their environments, their businesses, and working. So we help people move to the cloud, assess what they need, and then actually lower their bill, because it can go, run wild on you without knowing how much it costs. So a big area that has been a focus for us last year with startups and enterprises is really lowering their bill by a lot more than they can do themselves as a service.
See, no, that's where that makes a lot of sense. Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned about this rich data that you're getting from the community and being able to pull and see heat maps of where there's dead spots in the community or otherwise. Tell me about how you're collating some of this data. I know that you might be working with other counties or other information agencies to get some of this data. Tell me more about that.
So I think there's a lot of public data out there, as you know, Nate, but reality is not all the public data is actually what the end user expresses and experiences. So you really have to get to the end users, especially how is someone without broadband able to tell you on the internet that they don't have broadband, right? I mean, so it's outreach, community outreach is just as important, going and talking to the superintendents and the libraries and the students themselves and getting that feedback. And I think that's really important, trying to have them all work together. I think there's been the departments are starting to talk to each other. And for us as Kaizen, we like to be a partner. We like to think we're part of San Mateo County and just an extension of John's team versus someone that he's hired and he doesn't fully trust. John and I talk about the weaknesses and the strengths of our teams and how we best use our teams to work with each other. And I think that's really important on how Kaizen works with our clients is our partnerships.
As a company that puts its service first with its customers, that resonates strongly with us here at Unearth in terms of partnering with agencies and utilities to do the best work. So I love that philosophy personally. John, question for you. I'd be curious, how has COVID-19 affected this project and its priorities? And I know that's a loaded question, so just give me kind of a high level.
No, that's a great question. I think the challenge around COVID and the pandemic was, as a society, I think we were already shifting to more mobile, online kind of approach to things, but it was seen as, an additive, right? So from a government perspective, and, in my other life, I'm a trustee in a public school system, so I kind of see it from that side too, what's going on in the school districts. And, there was this idea before the pandemic that, you could go to a hospital and get treatment, or you would go to the school and get education, and then afterwards, maybe you would follow up with your doctor online, or maybe you would do some homework online. But it was considered sort of this online was still a luxury, was still an entertainment, was still a convenience tool, and wasn't really, like you all probably see it in this conference, the attendees, a utility, right? It wasn't an expectation that everyone would have access. But when the pandemic hit, my county, I have 8,000 employees. They immediately went home overnight. One day they were in offices, the parking lots were full, everybody was packed into their cubicles. On a Friday, Monday came, nobody was there. And that was, a microcosm of the entire county and the families. And I think to Dow's point, we had been doing public Wi-Fi for a while and getting people connected, but it was more based on what the community told us they thought they needed, and sort of this anecdotal approach, and really an approach where we said, okay, where are people already gathering together? Like after school centers, boys and girls clubs, community centers. So we were kind of taking this approach that, well, all these people are gathering here, so we'll take this utility, if you will, and put it there, and then they can take advantage of it. When COVID hit, the challenge for us, if we hadn't anticipated, everybody's sheltering in place now, not everybody's in their homes, right? And that's when I think you really have to take, like Dow said, a data-centric approach to how are you going to solve that problem, because it's no longer sort of this common sense approach, well, everyone's here, go do it there. You don't know where everyone is. It's a big county. We're 600 square miles, right? And there's no way we're going to blanket the entire county with connectivity. So you have to take, even with $6 million to spend, you have to take a really focused approach and use those heat maps and use that data. And I think the students, and I feel fortunate that, we have 23 independent school districts, but they all came together. They all provided Kaizen their data where their problems were reported. That's what created the maps. The student center really, I think, an indicator, a canary in the coal mine, you will, if what's going on in the community as a whole. If the students don't have connectivity, then the parents don't have connectivity, the house next to them probably doesn't have connectivity. So then it starts to impact small businesses, point of sale, elderly not being able to get telehealth appointments because they can't travel to the hospital. So, the tool that Kaizen developed was really interesting to me, because as a school district, what we would do is we would just say, okay, we have all these hotspots, take these hotspots home with your kids and you'll be fine. That would have worked perhaps, but we didn't anticipate, coverage areas are different in every area. So what Kaizen did is map out all the coverage maps for the different service providers, where Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, where I had connectivity. And really that then drove the decision-making process around the pandemic about where did we need to focus our efforts, because that's the key. When you have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of money, you want to make the biggest impact possible. We still have a lot of work to do. We've already projected we need probably another $100 million over the next 4 years to really address the remaining problem. And to your partners in this conference, what we already know is we've done what I would say is the easy stuff. We've created these hubs of connectivity all around the county. But what we need to do now is get out into the neighborhoods. And to do that, we need to place equipment on street lights, on traffic signal lights. We need to take advantage of the infrastructure that's already in the communities to reach out into those communities. And so we're about to go into that next phase of, we've put connectivity on all the public buildings, all the libraries and schools, but now we need to really mesh out from there and partner, with all the utility providers to say, how do we get more out into the residential areas? And I think that's going to be an exciting challenge for the next 2 years.
Oh, that's great. Let's actually dive into that a little bit. I'd love to hear about some of the challenges that our audience would know very well of serving residential communities, suburbia versus rural areas. Certainly that's created some challenges for the program on your side. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on how you've best found to tackle these issues.
Well, we're constantly looking for new technology with San Mateo and other providers too. So one of the things that we're testing this quarter is working with Starlink, which is a startup of SpaceX, and they are satellite broadband to the rural areas. And you have to sign up 30 people in a family set, right, of residences to sign up. And sometimes you don't always have 30 signed up right away, nor do people sign up without knowing what that capability is. So what we've done is we've prepaid for 30 households in San Mateo for several different areas, and we'll be lighting that up to allow the rural areas to get broadband. And let's say if we have 15, it's 15, but we're paying for 30, that's fine, right? But always looking at new technologies and testing them out versus just hotspots and RDUs, etc.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, and I'm sure your partners understand this, is, I think at the executive level, there's this perception that, if you just put a hotspot someplace, that's going to cover a whole neighborhood. But the reality of it is technically, it's a pretty limited range, even with high-powered Wi-Fi. I mean, you can get maybe 200-300 meters if you're lucky. And then penetration of buildings, we've all seen the pictures, people hate to see the pictures of the kids sitting outside Taco Bell and doing their homework and stuff. But, if they don't have an option, that's really their only option, is to go to some place where they can get connectivity. And the same things with telehealth. So, the challenge we're faced with technically is we've created these hubs. It's sort of a mini bubble of where people could come to, if you will, if they wanted connectivity, maybe sit in their cars or have a public space they work in. If they're lucky enough, their house is close to one of those bubbles, and if they're lucky, they don't have, you know, a house that has, you know, stucco on it with mesh that's going to prevent the signal getting in. Maybe it's a single wall dwelling or something, and then the Wi-Fi signal will penetrate into their home and they can sit in their home. So if we're going to go out into the community, you know, Kaizen's brought in partners that have been working with us on CBRS, which for us is a new technology that we're really trying to see what the range is and the penetration and how people can use that to connect. She mentioned satellite, you know, we're looking at millimeter wave, but there's all these, the terrain comes into it, and what do we attach to, and trees, we love them, but they're our worst enemy to try to get signals anywhere. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think, you know, there's definitely political will and interest, but we need partners to help us figure out, you know, where are we going to mount them. They need to be high up. Typically, they need power 24/7. So that's why we're really looking to, you know, partners like PG&E and AT&T and Verizon to say, you know, can we share utilities? You know, what's that going to look like if we partner on these things? Because really the partnerships going forward is going to be key. We can find different technologies. I'm confident that Kaizen and their partners can bring technology to the table that will get us into the neighborhoods. But then from a partnership standpoint, we have to find partners that already have facilities in the field. It doesn't make sense for us to try to create our own infrastructure in the field. We really need to partner with people to attach our infrastructure to theirs. And hopefully, you know, most companies, you know, have the same goal we do, is to make things better for the community. And I think that's really gonna create the success in the future.
I think what John says too, from a private and public partnership, is even the private companies need to get a little more agile and take some of the bureaucracy out from PG&E. I mean, some of the biggest problems we're having is just old laws and rules and regulations and, you know, approval processes that are taking too long to get the children the connectivity they need in families. So I think the reach out to everyone out here is like, how can you look at how you're doing things today and be a little more agile and be open to new ways of circumventing the old ways of doing things and approvals. That's really
Yeah, well, I think you've got a lot of heads nodding back at home as people are tuning in here in terms of wanting to move faster and move better. You know, both of you guys are road warriors when it comes to digital transformation. And John, this isn't your first rodeo. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the challenges working with San Mateo County and how that differed from your work in the San Francisco area? Because you did something very similar there, correct?
Yeah, it's it's worlds apart. I mean, it's the same problem, right? We were trying, when I was working for Gavin Newsom, you know, Gavin had this vision, which was great. San Francisco, if you think about it, the terrain's very hilly, of course, but it's a small community, very compact, 25 square miles. And so, you know, his vision at the time, and what I was working with him on, is he really wanted to blanket the entire city with Wi-Fi as a utility for the citizens. You know, on one hand, they're sort of like with the 5G conversation, there was a lot of anxiety with some of the public about what does that mean and things like that, because those were early days. He was really visionary when it came to what access was going to mean to the public as we started to put more and more things online. You know, ultimately that didn't work, but what came out of that, interestingly enough, was partnerships. We worked really closely with AT&T. They actually donated equipment and funded putting free public Wi-Fi down Market Street, all the way from City Hall down to the Ferry Building. Google came in and put in Wi-Fi in all the public parks around the city. I had a team, you know, in San Francisco, you got to think about it, it is sort of a fully contained sort of self-running entity, right? They own their own utilities and they own all the infrastructure. And so, you know, part of my team, I had a whole team that actually pulled dark fiber. We were able to, anytime we opened the road, we had a dig once policy that we created. Anytime we opened a road, we would throw in conduit, even if we weren't going to put fiber in it, in anticipation that someday we might need fiber in that area. And so we were able in 5 years to really do amazing things in the city to get businesses connected, low-income housing connected. But that was really, for me, not easy, but a different problem than in San Mateo County, which is 600 square miles, 19 cities, 23 school districts, different school districts, super different terrain. I mean, what we call the Bayside, the 101 corridors, very urban, pretty flat, but a lot of cities, so a lot of bureaucracy. Everybody, you know, has their own rules, and everybody knows that about permitting and things like that. So that's that's one set of challenges. Technically, I would say it would be easier. Like Dow mentioned, on the west side of the county, what we call the ocean side, that is super hilly. We had huge fires out there. I have 31 radio towers just for public safety radio to try to get connectivity, and I still have dead spots. So if you think about that, sure, there's always this dream that we're going to dig and put dark fiber everywhere and have 1 gig to every household. But I think that's pretty unlikely. I've been doing this a long time, and I love the vision. I love it when people talk about it. But as your partners know, the practicality of spending millions of dollars to trench and put fiber to a home that's 30 miles from anything else at the end of a dirt road is probably never going to happen. But we still need to create connectivity. The cell phone providers aren't going to build towers where there aren't subscribers. They're not required to do that. Now, I'm hopeful with AT&T and FirstNet with public safety, we'll get better coverage. But until then, it's going to take partners like Kaizen's bringing in to figure out how do we solve that problem differently. San Francisco, I owned everything. So if I wanted to, or my city did, if I wanted to put something somewhere, I went to Gavin or I went to Edley and said, hey, this is a needy neighborhood. I need you to sort of politically clear the way for me to go in here. And we had great partners. We were our own utility company, and AT&T and Verizon partnered. We're going to have to be a lot more inventive, a lot more innovative in San Mateo County to solve the problem. Everyone deserves connectivity. Everyone deserves the same access to educational resources, health resources, be able to work from home if they have that ability. And I think, we're not trying to compete with the private industry. We're really trying to complement it. But that's where we need those partnerships. I think our challenge in San Mateo County is really more around the partnerships. And I'm confident we can find the technology, but once we find that technology, it's going to take the Starlinks, it's going to take, the Arubas and the Ruckuses and the AT&Ts and the Verizon to come in and really help us figure out how to make that cost effective and share in that journey and share in the solution.
Fantastic. One of the themes for this conference is all about finding new ways to work together. And the word partnership, I think, has come up probably about 50 times in this conversation so far, which is great. Dow, it's clear that you're a key part of this partnership, and you're evaluating a lot of the partnerships between the San Mateo County. What are some of the things that you're looking for when you're evaluating other partners and people that might be working with the programs that you guys are doing right now?
Yeah, I'm looking for someone who has vision, and I think people who are open-minded and have the flexibility to care about looking at things differently. But I think a lot of it is personality. You're not going to get anything done without a type of maverick like a John Walton, who will push things and push people to understand the value to the end user. And those are the counties we're looking for, the ones who see such a passion and need to help out the community that will try to find their unique ways and keep pushing, because we're on calls every morning to get things done in 4 weeks time, 6 weeks time. And if you don't have both sides that committed, we'll never achieve it.
Yeah, along those lines, one of the things that I think all of us share is a better desire for better connectivity between counties in general, because there's so much information that gets trapped into these little pockets. Dow, I'm curious, what has your team found and ways to kind of free this data and make it actionable to your customers?
Well, we're hoping to talk to the state and even the FCC about having a more map that actually standardized across the United States. I mean, they don't even have mapping in Puerto Rico, and they have a need for connectivity there. So we're hoping that we can help provide that type of, mapping that's standardized, so that one county's non-connectivity is the same as another county's, and that when children and families move from county to work, it's seamless to them. And so there's got to be a partnership between the counties and the states as well, because, a lot of us still are getting on planes and cars and having to transport ourselves to work, right? And I don't need, like John says, a different WebEx system every time I'm working with someone else differently or I'm traveling around, right? It all should be the same, just like my hybrid car shouldn't need to have 5 different system apps in my, mobile phone to connect when I'm traveling to malls.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, the journey of connectivity, if you think about utilities in general, electric utilities, there was a time, we weren't standardized on the plug adapter type. There was a time we weren't standardized on the voltage that came through. And so, the early days, I'm not quite that old, but the early days of electricity was, non-standardized. And to really make rural electrification feasible, there had to be a lot of federal funding that came along because commercially it wasn't going to be affordable, and standardization had to come along because if you're going to have manufacturers creating equipment and public using it, every outlet can't be different. There can't be this competition for what the standards are for use. The use is what's important. And the same thing with cell phones. I don't worry when I travel around with my cell phone whose tower I'm attaching to. I don't have to re-authenticate every time I change a different cell coverage area. But that's where we're at with Wi-Fi right now. Like Dow said, if you move from one mini Wi-Fi bubble to another, you get dropped, you have to find the next one, you have to re-authenticate, you have to accept the splash screen. There's this whole friction of use that even when we're investing millions of dollars to make it accessible to people, we've created all these artificial barriers for fear of misuse or for fear of hackers, which is genuine concerns. But this is where, Kaizen can create the maps and create the opportunity for connection, but we really need the companies and the state governments and federal governments to come together and say, how do we create this unified experience? If we're going to invest all this money in connectivity, then there has to be some common themes and standards that when I'm traveling with my phone with Wi-Fi on, or my kid is with their Chromebook, they don't have to worry about, can I look for a Wi-Fi hotspot? Is it going to let me connect? It's just going to automatically find it and connect it in a secure way. What's on the back end is important to all of us that install it and manage it. But to the users, we don't care. We don't care what's under the hood. We don't care what's driving the car. We don't care how it's connecting. It just needs to work and it needs to make our lives better. And that's what we should get to eventually with Wi-Fi for the public. Not everyone, sure, some of us have unlimited data plans. I think I pay $300 a month so my kids can surf, YouTube continuously 24/7. But that's a luxury I have. That's a choice I make. And a lot of people are making choices about food or paying their rent, and they don't have that same choice. And I think, we all, and I understand having worked in the private sector for a stint between government jobs, I understand, we can't just be 100% altruistic and do this for the public good without some revenue and income. But I think that's where the partnerships have to come in. How do we find that balance of what the public good is and where can companies still benefit from it, either from a social give back or revenue sharing in the future, if we're all going to invest in it.
Well, I love your take on connectivity too, and the need for standardization in our industries. I look at my desk and I've got about 12 of these things just lying around, different connectors to plug into different things. And it seems like with software, we've just added more and more connectors and more dongles, but it's not really solving some of these problems. So the need to standardize makes a ton of sense. And some of the standardization that's really been happening is just around, migration to the cloud and moving systems out of the back office. Dow, I'd really love to hear from you. And this is a little bit of a basic question, but why do you feel migrating to the cloud is so important for public and private sectors right now?
Well, because of what we're just right now, even in the last year, right? You can't have your data center somewhere and no one can go in the office and really maintain those data centers if you're not allowed into the buildings. So you've got to have something that you can work with remotely, and maybe that becomes the main data center, but your on-site data centers are your disaster recovery, and we're putting everything upside down.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dow is definitely the expert in cloud, and government's journey to the cloud has been slower than it probably should have been, but we're definitely there now. And I think for me, the benefit I'm seeing to programs like this, to partners like Kaizen is, again, from a standardization standpoint, it's hard to standardize when everyone has their own sort of proprietary closed systems that they manage internally. I think one of the things I've seen that it enables us to do this is, once we start sharing, we need a place to share. We need a place to go where there's some visibility, where there's some transparency. To really figure out how to make things work together. And that's one thing I've seen that I didn't anticipate as we migrated to the cloud is now I'm talking to other partners, Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Francisco. And by putting things in the cloud and sharing with them in the cloud, what we're doing and our data and our maps and making it publicly accessible in a secure way to people that should see it, right? We're all concerned about proprietary information or sensitive critical infrastructure information. But, with trusted partners, with NDAs, it kind of creates a central clearinghouse, and it gives us the opportunity to see where we're the same, where there's differences, where we can standardize. If we just keep everything trapped within our own mini data centers and our own jurisdictions, we never get that opportunity. There's a lot of there's a lot of goodwill and there's a lot of desire to share, but you've got to find that place to collaborate. And sure, we have to manage the costs. I think Dow pointed that out. Moving to the cloud isn't free, but it creates that space to share and compare and to start really creating regional solutions, which is where we should be. I mean, none of us live and work and go to school, and our hospitals, they're not all in the same little bubble. We all travel around. So, the more we can standardize and find places like, we're using the Amazon cloud for this project, and they're really trying to help us understand how we're using it and then how that can relate to standardization with San Jose and San Francisco and Oakland. I think Kaizen's doing some work over there as well. That's going to give us this opportunity to really create sort of this regional bubble of connectivity. And if it's all in the same place, I think that's really going to be the benefit.
Yeah, we call that coming into one place at Unearth, but I hear you. Indeed. So thank you guys so much for joining me for today's session. It was an exciting conversation, and I know that our audience got a lot out of it. So big thank you to John and Dow for joining us. And we look forward to speaking again in the future, guys.
Thank you for having us, Nate.